There is something I am about to explain that could genuinely protect your life, and it has been right in front of you during every blood pressure check you've ever had, okay? Two values, one stacked above the other. You've looked at them countless times. Your clinician refers to them at nearly every appointment. Yet there is a critical truth most people are never told in simple terms. One of those numbers carries far greater risk than the other, particularly once you pass the age of 55. And the value causing the most harm among older adults may not be the one you've been paying attention to. Okay? My name is Nicholas, and over the past decade, I've been working as a pharmacy practitioner. I have interacted closely with many seniors living with high blood pressure. I have personally seen individuals endure deeply painful outcomes while others manage to regain stability and health. I have also witnessed the harsh reality of repeated strokes and the long-term damage they leave behind. I have watched families suffer irreversible loss because the wrong numbers were dismissed, the wrong goal was prioritized, and the consequences were permanent. Everything I am about to explain is grounded in decades of large-scale medical research involving millions of patients worldwide. This is not speculation. What I am sharing is a solid life or death information that every person over the age of 55 years must clearly understand. By the time you reach the end of this video, you'll know precisely which blood pressure number presents the greatest danger to your heart, your brain, and your overall survival, okay? You'll also learn why this particular number becomes increasingly harmful as the years go by. And most importantly, you will walk away knowing exactly what steps you should begin taking today. These 15 or 20 minutes could turn out to be some of the most valuable time you've ever invested all the year. So stay with me because the answer may not be what you expect. Let us begin with the fundamentals because it is essential that you fully grasp what these two numbers actually mean, okay? When a doctor or a nurse places that cuff around your arm and tightens, the device is measuring the force of blood pressure against the walls of your arteries. However, blood pressure doesn't remain steady. It rises and falls with each heartbeat, okay? That's why two readings are given. The upper number, known as the systolic pressure, which reflects the highest level of force produced when the heart contracts and pumps blood into the arteries, okay? Think of it as an ocean wave hitting the shore. That instant of impact represents the highest level of pressure. The lower number, called the diastolic pressure, reflects the lowest pressure in your arteries when the heart relaxes between the beats, okay? It is the quiet pause between each surge. So when a blood pressure reading shows 150/90, it means that the maximum pressure reaches 150 millimeters of mercury, while the pressure during rest falls to 90, okay? For many years, medical professionals placed equal importance on both of these numbers. If either reading was above normal, it was considered high blood pressure and usually required immediate treatment. However, over the last 3 decades, researchers have closely monitored millions of individuals over a long period of time, observing who develops heart attacks, who suffers strokes, and who ultimately dies from cardiovascular disease. From the enormous body of data, a distinct pattern has become clear, and this pattern grows stronger and more concerning as people age. To help you clearly understand what I'm about to explain, let me share the story of two patients. Their experiences reveal the difference in a very real way. The first patient was Anne, who was 75 years old. She visited her physician for what was supposed to be a routine cardiology checkup. That day, her blood pressure measured 160/75. Anne was genuinely pleased. She told her doctor, I quote, "My lower number looks great. I've worked hard to keep it below 80 and now it's down to 75. I know the top number is somewhat elevated, but I was told that if the bottom number is under control, there isn't much reason to worry. End of quote. I wish I could say that reassurance turned out to be true. But 6 months later, Anne suffered a severe stroke. The left side of her body became paralyzed. Her speech was difficult to understand. The energetic, independent woman who had confidently walked into her doctor's office was suddenly relying on her children for even the most basic daily tasks. The reason? Years of uncontrolled systolic pressure had been quietly damaging the blood vessels in her brain, while attention remained fixed on celebrating a perfect diastolic reading. The second patient was John, a 65 years old man. His blood pressure reading was 127/94. John was extremely anxious. He shared his concerns openly with his doctor and said, I quote, "Doctor, my lower number has been slowly increasing over the years. I have read online that diastolic pressure is the most dangerous one, the number that means that your heart is under constant strain. I am scared that I am heading towards a heart attack." End of quote. Because of his concern, his doctor ordered a full cardiac evaluation. This included an exercise stress test, an echocardiogram, and a coronary calcium scan. The results were reassuring. His heart function was normal and his arteries showed very little plaque buildup. While his diastolic pressure did need attention, his overall risk was far lower than he had imagined. Here were two patients showing two very different blood pressure patterns and experiencing completely different outcomes. And that leads us to the most important question, the one you came here to have answered, okay? Which blood pressure number carries greater danger, systolic or diastolic? Before I reveal the answer, there is something essential you must understand. This question does not have the same answer for every person. Okay? If you are 35 years old, the answer is not the same as it is for someone who is 65 years older. Age plays a major role in determining which blood pressure number carries the greatest danger, okay? And because most people watching this channel are over 60, I want to focus specifically on what the scientific evidence shows for your age group, okay? This is where the message becomes unmistakably clear and where understanding it can quite literally protect your own life. The evidence that reshaped how doctors view blood pressure risks comes from several enormous long-term studies, okay? One of the most influential was the Framingham Heart Study, which followed more than 5,000 individuals for decades. Another major investigation, the MRFIT study, tracked over 300,000 men. Time and time again, study after study involving millions of participants reached the same conclusion. After the age of 60 years, systolic blood pressure is a much stronger predictor of cardiovascular event than the diastolic pressure, okay? In some research, systolic pressure was found to be 2 to 3 times more accurate at predicting heart attack and stroke risks in older adults, and the findings became even more compelling beyond that point, okay? Researchers began to notice a striking pattern. In many older adults, the systolic number steadily rises, while the diastolic number remains normal or even declines further, okay? This combination creates a condition known as isolated systolic hypertension. This was exactly the pattern Anne had. Remember the Anne we discussed, okay? For many years, clinicians were uncertain how to interpret it. Some believed that if the diastolic pressure stayed within a normal range, then perhaps it wasn't true hypertension at all. Others assumed that it was simply a natural part of getting older. We now understand that this assumption was dangerously incorrect, okay? Isolated systolic hypertension is not harmless. It is not merely a sign of aging. It is a serious medical condition that significantly raises the risks of heart attack, stroke, heart failure, and kidney disease. Research has demonstrated that properly treating isolated systolic hypertension can reduce the risk of stroke by 30 to 40% and lower risk of heart attack by 15 to 25%. These are not small effects. These findings translate into thousands of lives saved and countless cases of long-term disability prevented every year. So let me state this as clearly as possible. If you are over the age of 60 years, your systolic blood pressure, that top number on your reading, is the most dangerous number you need to pay attention to, okay? This is the value that most accurately predicts whether a person is likely to experience a heart attack or stroke. This is the number you should monitor closely, almost like a gatekeeper for your health. This is the number that must be brought under control. Now, does that mean that diastolic pressure is unimportant? No, it absolutely still matters, but it plays a different role. And understanding that distinction is critical because it directly influences how blood pressure should be treated, okay? To make this clearer, let me walk you through the physiology behind it, okay? Once you understand why systolic pressure becomes more dangerous as we age, the picture starts to come together. Your arteries are not hard, inflexible pipes. They are elastic vessels designed to expand slightly with each heartbeat and then spring back, okay? This elasticity, the ability to stretch and recoil, serves an essential purpose. It helps absorb some of the peak pressure generated by every heartbeat, which in turn smoothens the force of blood flow and shields your organs from constant stress, okay? When you are younger, your arteries are naturally flexible. They widen easily with each heartbeat. This keeps systolic pressure relatively lower and diastolic pressure relatively higher because the arteries are still able to recoil during the resting phase of the heartbeat. As the years pass, however, the arteries gradually lose this flexibility. The elastic fibers within the arterial walls begin to degrade and are replaced by tougher, less flexible collagen. Calcium deposit can accumulate in the vessel walls. Atherosclerotic plaque starts to form. Over time, the arteries shift from behaving like stretchable rubber bands to acting more like stiff, rigid tubes. When the heart contracts and pushes a surge of blood into these stiffened arteries, they are no longer able to expand and cushion the force. As a result, systolic pressure rises sharply. Meanwhile, during the relaxation phase between the heartbeats, those rigid arteries do not spring back effectively. Because of this, diastolic pressure often remains within normal limits or even decrease. This explains why isolated systolic hypertension is so common among people over the age of 60 years. It is a direct consequence of arterial stiffening, okay? And here is the most important point to understand. That elevated systolic pressure is not simply a harmless sign of stiff arteries. It is actively inflicting harm. Each time systolic pressure surges, it places repeated stress on vital organs, that is the brain, kidneys, heart, and even the eyes. With every heartbeat, fragile blood vessels within these organs are exposed to injury. Think of it the way ocean waves strike a seawall, okay? A handful of strong waves won't do much damage, but thousands of waves crashing day after day, year after year, eventually causes cracks to form. That is exactly how elevated systolic pressure affects your blood vessels. It creates microscopic damage over time. Your body attempts to repair these small injuries, but the repair process itself leads to increased stiffness, heightened inflammation, and greater buildup of atherosclerotic plaque. This becomes a self-perpetuating cycle that continues to worsen. Brain is especially at risk. The tiny blood vessels that supply brain tissue are not designed to withstand constant pressure. Over time, they can develop microaneurysm, These are small weakened areas that may rupture and cause hemorrhagic stroke, or they may become narrowed or blocked, which leads to an ischemic stroke. And even without a major stroke occurring, chronically elevated systolic pressure can cause thousands of tiny so-called silent strokes, okay?